right. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon, and thanks for taking time. I know you had a lot of choices in attending the session, and you choose this one. Hopefully, this would be a good one. I apologize in advance for my scratchy voice. I flew in from San Francisco, and the flight and jet lag didn't help, so I apologize in advance. All right, so let's start this session. My name is Shailesh, and I lead business intelligence platform at Uber. Now, my team's responsibility is to manage tools that enable data insights for people at Uber, right? So what the responsibility is to have these people do their job by taking business decisions based on the data. Before Uber, I was at ThoughtSpot. ThoughtSpot is a startup. It was a startup. I was a founding team member there. I joined when we were less than 10 people. And when I left 5 years after, it was about 300 people, and it's more than 500 people right now. Before I went to ThoughtSpot, I went to school at UC Berkeley. Before that, I was at University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. And before that, I was at school in India, went to IIT Guwahati. So before I start with and go into the heat of the discussion, I want to start with a very small quiz. And let's see how you guys understand your pizza. Which one do you think is the most popular pizza? And let's look at the options. Is it the margherita? Is it the sausage? Is it pepperoni, or is it tofu? Any guesses? Pepperoni. So I hear pepperoni, I hear margherita. That's a good question. So the answer is it depends. The answer is it depends. And before I go into the details of what it depends on, let's have an agreement on how do we calculate this answer, right? So the answer is based on the data. And it depends on which data are you looking at. So if you look at the UK data, which one comes out to be the winner? Any guesses? So there's a close fight between margherita and sausage. If you look at India, any guesses? Tofu, or as we call it, paneer, wins the battle. And if we look at worldwide sales, pepperoni comes out to be on the top, margherita is number 2, and tofu is not even in top 10. So what do we learn here? What we learned is that as we were looking at more data, we found out some new insights. Not just new, different insights, better insights, right? And a complete picture, right? So having a complete picture of your data is important. It doesn't matter how much data you collect. It is important if you have the complete picture or not. Now, can you afford to have a similar situation arising with your business where you are taking decisions on silos of data? How many of you use spreadsheets? Everyone in my company have used spreadsheet, right? Of course, everybody here uses spreadsheet. And people even take decisions on those spreadsheets of data, even in the company. And sometimes, not even from the spreadsheet, sometimes people have multiple right answers to the questions. Right? You cannot afford to have that situation arising at your company. Now, how many of you have heard a popular belief that we only use 10% of our brains? Anybody? No? Well, I don't know whether that's scientifically right or not, but a lot of companies are acting in that way. They are taking decisions on subset of data. They're only utilizing a subset of the power of the data that they have. Right? So that's what I'm going to discuss today. What are the systems in place that Uber put in place to make sure that we have a complete picture, not just on the subset of data, but on the complete data? So I'm going to talk about 3 things. These are the 3 takeaways for today. First, invest in a consolidated platform. Make sure that you have a single source of truth accessed by everyone at your company. Number 2, in order to fully utilize the true potential of that data or the consolidated platform, build and invest in simple and intuitive UIs. so that everyone in the company can democratize insights, self-serve them without having to rely on somebody else. And number 3, utilize the true potential of the data science community in your company, not just have them as a person to go to find our answer and not have a transactional value with them, but be inclusive and have the true potential of the data science embed into the platform that you create. Now, how does that fit into Uber overall? Uber's mission is to ignite opportunity by setting the world in motion. That's a big undertaking. And we are proud to be taking data-driven decisions from the very first beginning, right? We collect a lot of data, as you can imagine. All the trips data. How do you guys contact us? What is the contact rate of support? How much do we need to invest in those, right? In fact, even the data of the data, how many queries do we have? How many infrastructure do we need to build on that? So we are really powering all of our decisions by the complete data. And our business is unique in itself. We are in more than 600 cities. And we not just transport people, we also deliver food. We deliver freight or transport freight. And we have very unique conditions in these cities. And our partners, our driver partners or courier partners, use various forms of transportation. It can be a car, it can be a bike, it can be a motorbike, anything. So while we are at that global stage, we have to understand the pulse at the local level. So we can't really have either a global picture or a local picture. We need to have both. So this is one slide which reflects the scale of the business that we have and how does that translate into the scale of data that we have at Uber. And I hope you are impressed with these numbers. So 15 million is the number of daily trips that we power by data. 2 trillion Kafka topics are ingested on a daily basis. More than 1 million queries are written on various platforms that we have on a daily basis. All of these are 24 hours numbers. And we ingest 150 terabyte of data daily into our Hadoop. Combined together, that's more than 100 petabytes of data that we have and manage. We have more than 10,000 users of our platform. So my team manages, and that's a conservative number. Honestly, that's close to 12,000 now, but 10,000 plus people who manage and take decisions on a daily basis. Now, in order to understand them better, I have classified them into 4 different categories, and I think that's the same classification that will apply to you in your company too. On the left hand of the spectrum, we have Reliant Rebeccas of the world. These are the real decision makers and driving the business forward, right? So these guys, these people do not have the technical skills or the time to work with data themselves. These people rely mostly on other people to get those data insights. The second one here is Monitoring Matt. Monitoring Matt, know a little bit of SQL. They work in very close conjunction with Reliant Rebecca. And Reliant Rebecca, Monitoring Matt, understand what is happening with the business and then get a pulse of the business by data insights. The third one is Analyst Anna. They are very, very familiar with SQL. They understand what is happening with different dashboarding solutions. They know a little bit of Python. And the extreme end of the spectrum are inventor Iwans of the world, and they are the ones who are typically data scientists. They are doing data modeling. They are creating machine learning models, and so on and so forth. So there's a clear spectrum from, and all of these, you have to be prepared to cater to needs of all of these 4. All right, so let's go back to the 3 takeaways. What was the first one? The first one was invest in a consolidated platform. Now, how did we do that? The extreme bottom end of the spectrum is ingestion pipelines. So we have all these applications, both driver and rider, ingesting data through Kafka, and they ingest data into the storage layer. Now, there are two components of that storage layer that we have. On the left side, we have batch. In batch, we have Presto, Hive, and Vertica, and the streaming of data can go into either batch or real time or both of them. We can also transfer data from batch to real time. Batch is typically for historical analysis, any type of historical analysis that you want to do. On the right side, real time is typically for any sort of an interactive real time, any data that is just put in, right? So any recent sort of analysis. On top of this is the data access layer. Now, this is extremely important for the scale that we are managing. As I mentioned, we have more than 1 million queries written per day. We cannot afford to have cannot live without data access layer. Data access layer helps us manage this load very well, right? So all the resource management, which queries are going to which node, right? Queuing of that query. All of this is managed by the left-hand side of the data access layer, which is called query runner. So this runs the query, manages this query, queuing of that query, all of that happens. Query result, on the other hand, handles all the executions of the query. So we don't want all of this executions that we have run to be thrown away. We reuse that often, right? So query results manages all the previous executions and then fetches the results whenever possible. All right, so till now, what you have learned is consolidated platform is really important. Why? Because it helps us deliver single source of truth for everyone. That is good, but it also helps us in other ways through, so if you have to implement something which is at one place and not at 10 different places, just example was the security layer that we wanted to add. Now, we have 50 different applications running on top of this consolidated platform, but rather than investing in 50 different places and adding those security layer in 50 different places, we just added it at one place, right on top of the consolidated platform, right? So when the GDPR happened, we didn't have to go into all of these applications and made sure that our security layer was compliant or not for all of these applications. We just went to one place, right? So there are three components of the security layer. One is the functionality access. The functionality access helps us decide who can really create content or who can just be an executor of that content. The second one is just like Google document model. You can decide which user can share in what form, view or edit access. And the third form is around privacy and retention. So based on the user's persona, what is your day-to-day look like, they can decide on whether I can access the privacy information or not. For example, somebody in safety managing an incident related to an assault, they need to understand who was the driver and who was the rider at that point, right? So this is based on their day-to-day. Okay, cool. Now we have the entire consolidated platform ready. The second takeaway was around building a simple and intuitive UI on top of these consolidated platform. Now, what did we do? The first thing that we invested was just one very simple, easy-to-use SQL interface. Now, that was the first application that we built at Uber. Now, I want to make sure that everybody understands this correctly. We had various storage layer components, right? So we had Pinot, we had AirSDB that we just recently open sourced, we have Hive, we have Vertica, all of this, and all of this are accessed by different query languages. But what we did was we put in one interface, just plain SQL, everybody understands it, and have translators underneath, hide all the complexity underneath the UI without having to users take care of all of that. Right? So just one interface, all of the storage layers accessed by one interface. A lot of users came to us and say, hey, we can't write SQL. So what was our next step? We said, all right, we'll give you a dashboard. And that dashboard was a custom-built dashboard. We didn't realize our scale at that time. So that custom dashboard was a list of standard metrics provided on a platter to all the business users, all the GMs of the world. And we said, these are the key metrics that you need to look for. You can either filter it by a city, you can filter by product, you can bucketize based on the time window. It can be weekly, monthly, and so on. And everybody loved it. Till the point when we went into eats. And everybody said, hey, where are the courier metrics? And we soon realized this can't scale. We need to provide a customizable, easy-to-use dashboarding solution too. So what we went into is two directions. We said, geospatial is important, so let's give them what we call as Kepler today. And we also gave them Dash Builder, which was an easy-to-use, customizable dashboard for everyone. So they can track any of their product launches, any of their campaigns, all of those was at one place. Now, people could have created their own summary themselves, right? Now, what was the next step? People said, hey, why can't you give me exploration capabilities too? So we went ahead and provided exploration capabilities. If you're not familiar with Kepler, search for kepler.gl. We recently open sourced it. And you can even use that in your BI tools if you want. This is an open source DeckGL based framework. We are doing the same thing for dash building too. All right, so this is the complete picture of the consolidated platform at the bottom and a various application layer stack on the top. So I think that is it, right? But do you ever see your data users ever satisfied? Not really, right? So what is the next step? They came back, hey, we are still blocked on data scientists. I said, what is that? So that's when you have to convert the power of the data scientist, use these applications, and make sure you're providing these specialized skills of the data scientist in an easily consumable format in these UIs too. So what did we do? We looked at these non-technical users. They are always going to the data scientist for any advanced techniques, right? So our dream of having an unblocking of the non-technical users wasn't fulfilled yet. So what we did was we asked these data scientists, what are the common type of analysis that these users ask you for? And let's combine the power of the platform, use that specialist skill, and convert everyone into a data scientist and let them use it themselves. So what did we do? Let's take an example. We recently released forecasting. So what we did was we just embedded the forecasting platform. So data scientists were already doing forecasting, right? They were happy with it. And these users will go to good data scientists and ask for the forecasted data. So we said, how are they consuming it? They are consuming through dash building applications. So why don't we embed that in dash building applications itself? So what did we do? We asked data scientists to convert their models into a service. So specialized services were created based on the models that they had created. And we embedded that into our applications very easily, right? So for those of you who don't know how we use forecasting, essentially it helps us prepare for the future. We prepare for our city strategy based on the forecast. We even forecast the number of queries, as I said, and prepare for our infrastructure requirements too, right? So what it took more than a week. Now, everybody knows data scientists is busy, right? They're super busy. They have a long queue of things that they want to do. And they were taking more than a week. Now, no offense to them, they had better things to do, right? So it took them more than a week. Now, can the business stop for a week? Absolutely not. So what we did was, and this is an interesting graph. It's not super clear, but let me explain you what it is. We are forecasting here the forecasting usage. So I looked at the usage of the forecast and I forecasted it. So you see the inception? Not really? but I couldn't show any real numbers here because we are going IPO. So, all right, so are the users satisfied yet? Not really? I thought they will be, man. All right, so they're still not. So people ask me, what next? Right? So you have done this consolidated platform. You have built these applications which are easy to use. Everybody could self-serve. We have advanced analysis also being delivered in this easy to use intuitive UIs, but people are not satisfied yet. So I went to all of the users and I said, what next? And I looked at their workflow. So what they said is that, hey, you are doing a great job in explaining what is happening with my business, but you're not still explaining me why. Right? Like, why is this happening? So we need to move from what to why. So what did we do? Let's take an example. We looked at a common paradigm where you are looking at a metric. Again, this is a forecasting usage, not real numbers, but this could very easily be a trip, right? Number of trips going up, and all of a sudden it goes down. A decision maker or a GM would say, why is that happening? And where will they go? To a data scientist. So what we said is that why can't we let the users introspect that area of the segment themselves? So we invested in all of these root cause analysis techniques behind the scenes. We asked all of our data scientists to not give or serve the fish on the platter, teach the users how to fish themselves, right? So we created services for all the root cause analysis underneath, hide all the complexity of what these models offer, and provide a very easy to use interface. A user could click only 2 points of interest and hit compare. What is happening? Tell me why. We send that data to all of these services underneath. User doesn't know. We fetch that data back to dashboards, and we present them into new graphs. All of this without users understanding what is really happening with the system. Cool, so this hasn't been released. This is what we are working on right now. But that's when I hope people will be happy. But let's see. All right, so this was pretty, so let's see what we learned. So we learned invest in a consolidated platform, built in easy to use interfaces, have these advanced analytics use cases slapped embedded to these applications, and have the users use it themselves rather than have a transactional system in place with data scientists, right? So what are the lessons learned? Help on develop a centralized place, a unified place where people can get access without having to go into 10 different places for the same data. Number 2, build for the experts, but design for the non-technical folks. And that's a very hard, very, very hard thing to do. Somebody said designing a simple system is actually a hard thing to do, right? Because you're hiding all of that complexity underneath. And number 3 is that you have to be 3 steps ahead. You have to think about what are users asking for? What is the next step in the workflow? What is the next logical step that the users are asking for? Right? And that is it. Thank you. Thank you for your time, and I'll take some Q&A. And please rate this session. I don't think I need to convince you guys, because if I don't know what I need to improve on, I can't improve. Right? So data is the key. So thank you. Thank you, guys. I'll take questions if there are any. Yes?
Thanks for the session. When you talk about training your users, whenever you roll out these systems, what has been your typical cycle for training and starting to use these applications that you have been rolling out?
Okay, so the question, I repeat, is when we roll out these systems, what is a typical training cycles that we involve in to make sure that these users are using the systems themselves, right? So this is a great question. So we invest heavily in training, although we don't want to use training as a crutch, right? So we want to make sure that we are designing the system such that there is, if not no training, only minimal training is required, right? So we have people all over the world, so we can't really have in-person training for all of them. So we mostly have recorded videos, a snippet of videos, because nobody has time in the world to watch like 1 hour long training sessions. So we create bite-sized videos, and since most of the folks, non-technical folks, are using the interfaces, again, we have a very dedicated design team who is working on the internal tools itself. So we make it super simple. Yeah?
I understand that you started from predictions, and now you're going towards explaining what makes those predictions. And the question is, do you have the prescriptions in the pipeline as well? Because I would be asking the question of, okay, I know what's going to happen, I know what is happening, and I would like to know as the next step what to do. Is it on the pipeline as well, or are you just going to leave that to the managers?
Right. So the question is, I think that's a great question. The question here is, we predict, we forecast. I am telling the users why is this happening, and is the next step, logical step, is what to do with that, right? Like, so prescribe, is prescription in the pipeline? So great question. I think before I answer that question, I want to make a key explanation about what we are doing here, right? So when we show something to the non-technical users, let's say a forecast, or we show something which is or a causal analysis, right? We have to be very careful that they're not deriving any wrong inferences from that. So first of all, we are putting in enough guardrails for the non-technical users so they're not taking a wrong inference out of it. So we explain with all the analysis that we do that this is what is happening, and we are taking the following assumptions. Are these assumptions right? And users can overrun or change those assumptions. That's number one. Number two, we have put in guardrails by the data scientists into the systems too. So for example, we have a 1:4 ratio for forecast. So if you have 4 steps, you can only, or 4 time intervals, let's say 4 weeks, you can only forecast up to 1 week onwards, right? So that the forecast quality is not below the threshold that we want non-technical users to use it. Right? So we are putting enough guardrails. Now, when we go into the prescription model, that becomes even hazier. If we don't involve the business sense, this is the reason these business users are relying on it. We want a human component to it. We really want a human to vet out these insights and then say this is right or not. And as we are putting in this vetting mechanism, we are improving over a period of time. Right? So at some point, maybe, not in the near future, because we really see a human as an important component to this entire exercise. I think he got first, yeah.
Do you type of user input? For example, if the push don't want something, to put input and get insight based on that input, let's say number of customers or list of customers, and they want insight on that specific customer. Do you cater for something like this?
Sure. So the question here is that do you allow user input into your applications to put in, and based on the user input, you can modify the insight, is that right?
Yeah.
So you can modify the insight based on that? Absolutely. So that's what we allow in the interactivity. So initially, when we built the first version of Kepler and Dash Builder, we only allowed monitoring capabilities, right? So whatever you have, that's all you see. Now you can interact with the application. Now the users can provide input based on what they want to see. Right? If they want to only see, let's say, top 10% of the customers, or top 10% of the cities, and filter the rest of it and continue the further analysis on that. Right? So that sort of interactivity saves users to write any further queries, or either go to data scientists to do that analysis for them.
Is this tool used by C-suite executives? And if it is, do you change it in any way, or just give it to them as it currently is?
So the question is are these tools used by C-suite?
Yeah.
So again, great question. So when we built Summary, that was the primary go-to place for all the executives in the company, and that still is, right? So we haven't moved away from building any custom applications because they are so easy to use. So C-suites are using those applications because they're just super easy, not time consuming. It gives them a business sense in just one place, but essentially they don't really have the time to invest in that. That's the major hurdle here, right? So they want something which gives them a sense, and then there are monitoring mats of the world who do not have the skills, but they work very close conjunction with the C-suite to give them insights as they need, right? So we don't want C-suites to be waiting for these monitoring mats and going out for weeks to get insights back. So although they are not using it, but they are essentially being powered by these tools. Yeah.
So many different customers within your company. How did you cater for all the different needs? So you said you talked to them, but what did it look like?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Honestly, it's easier for us because all of these are internal folks and everybody is helpful. I mean, not surprisingly, we are Uber, right? So internally, everybody you go to and you can just go and talk to them. But we do rely on data of these tools heavily. So we look at data of how people are using it, where do they go from one platform to the other. So we have even invested in other platforms outside BI too, right? As you can imagine, we have like an extensive tutorial around what are the tables. We have so many different tables, model tables, non-model tables, which table should the user go to. So all of the data across going to platform, where are people dropping off, all of this analysis we do internally, right? And then we, on top of it, we collect quantitative feedback from them too. Yeah.
Is there a reason why you built the custom application yourself as well before you tried to?
So great question. Question is there a reason why you built custom applications yourself and not went with a BI tool? So if you remember in my introduction, I worked with ThoughtSpot. ThoughtSpot is an enterprise BI tool. So when I joined the company, that was my first thing. So we asked ourselves, what do we need to build and what do we need to buy? So we have extensive or specific type of use cases like geospatial, for example, is just too extensively, right? So we anyway had to build some component of it, and we have few tools that we use for very specific analysis. So it's not a build-only tool, but those are only confined to a few teams, let's say one team or a two team. Like growth, for example, have specific tools understanding user behavior analysis. Now that's not relevant for everyone in the company. So the two reasons: one, there were niche use cases for Uber, and then two, they were widely applicable. So we said, let's build the ones which are niche and also widely applicable, and buy the ones that are not so commonly applicable. And we integrated all of them together. Yeah.
How long did it take to build the platform?
So a good question. How long did it take to build a platform? The platform was built before I joined. And it took us 2 years to build that platform, around 2 years to build that platform. And it's an ongoing process. Honestly, we are still developing it. We are still making it better. The performance and the integrations, all of this is still ongoing.
Going back to that same question, why didn't you guys, if you were building from scratch, just unify in one SQL stack? Why have a translator and an intermediate dialect? So imagine if Hive changes the interface, you have to go back and change the translator.
Yeah, so going back to expanding on the previous question was asked, why didn't we buy? So we invested a lot of in the open source technology, and we said we can make those. So again, not everything was built from scratch, right? So we took a lot of open source technology and we said, well, buying is easy, of course, but we can also invest our capital in contributing to that open source, and also if we are building something new, we can open source ourselves. So we are investing in open source. We are creating that tech brand. We are also just helping the tech community. right? So these are the key reasons why we incline towards building ourselves. And also we started this multiple years ago, right? So the technology then was different than what we are seeing right now.
Great.
Cool.
That's it.
Well, thank you.